All right,
Okay.
Hi,
take it away.
well, we sent you a note, so it could sort of frame it. So where we are is, we wanna make sure we're on the same page to say that we're trying to, encourage you to look at ways to, at least in a small part of town, allow for more moderately priced housing. And we put out a couple of ideas, and, as we've set down here. And we are also willing, as you know, to give specific language, but we want it to be as close to what the board would like as possible. Of course, our goal would be for you to leap up from this meeting and say, yes, we're converted, we want to change the zoning ordinance.
No,
Bring
no
something
leaping
ourselves.
allowed.
No
in the-
leaping, okay.
It's in the ordinance. But you said you were gonna supply us with 2 specific proposals?
Oh, did we say that in the, well, actually, I think that what you're seeing is a difference of opinion between Liz and Rich that didn't get worked out in the drafting.
Okay,
So the two proposals were the note that we discussed the previous meeting, that was the, no?
Well, you see, we don't talk out of one mouth. Here's
Speak,
Rich's what
speak
he
amongst
thinks.
yourselves and get
Okay.
back to us.
I mean, in the note that we gave you the last time on August 25th, there were two proposals. One was
Oh, August 8th?
25th.
I have the
No,
August
We
8th.
met on the 25th, but the note was
Oh, the note was
Yeah,
done.
I have the
okay,
August
okay,
8th.
okay, all right, so it's the August 8th.
And on the 25th, we talked about allowing conversion
Right.
and waiving the 5-year.
Right.
Conversions if there's senior housing. And the second proposal that we provided was that we wanted there to be similar to attached buildings.
But was that a specific proposal or was that a general proposal? I don't have that one. I
That
have,
was a general, I mean,
That
there,
was the
there was
pre-zoning.
specific wording.
okay, I didn't have this one.
Uh,
Where, structures less than 5 years old.
No.
Where's the other one?
Decided that-
Yeah, that's all I have. So, do you have specific language about the connection stuff?
We did, we said that for reasons of accessibility and all,
No, but I mean, did you-
don't,
You have,
Did not
I mean,
bring
you
that
have like
today.
a ordinance language
Well,
here. Do you have
uh,
ordinance language on that?
I don't think we have language on connecting.
actually, I think
Okay,
it's in
so
your
it was just a
minutes.
general
Just a second.
So
Let me-
this
let me-
just says one building may be connected if 1/3 of the units are restricted to having only one bedroom, is that the
I think that was
connected
the language, yeah, that was it.
That's on the August 8th thing at the very bottom, under G.
Right.
G.
So it's
That was
within
the
this.
second proposal.
May be connected if, I see. But there's no definition of connection.
Well, that's partly because Lyme isn't really clear. What we wanted to do was make it so you could share an elevator. So any way you can connect it so that you didn't have to pay for 2 elevators and so that you could be old and go out, not have to go outside to go to the to the kitchen. So we're pretty flexible about connected. But,
So the definition of connected is being able to share an elevator without going outside.
Right.
Okay.
so there's probably a bunch of different, so that's the goal.
Okay.
And what the language would be, I'm not sure, I bet you could, because we had talked before about zero, this is going back in history now, 0 lot line, and you said, well, the 2 buildings could abut each other, but you couldn't have a door with one, walking from one building to the other. And we said, so, let us have a door, that would be sufficient.
All right,
So I think what you asked now was, were we gonna have 2 specific proposals?
Well, it
What
said-
happened
it
is
says
I
here.
drafted that part and said.
it says,
would
we
have
will
2
submit these under separate cover.
That's right, that was my voice, and
Okay.
then Rich said, no, I think what we should do is say to the board, look at, here's 3 ideas that the board could do, so
Right.
Okay.
let's,
Um,
and
so-
we've got language that would allow.
Right,
for
I get
planned
it, I get it now.
development,
So we have this,
but- Well, I'd
that-
even give you another one, we're persuaded that, you guys think that the conversion language is too much of it, not directly addressing the problem, so.
well, it's not, the conversion the conversion topic
It's not, right.
is about conversions, and this is not a conversion.
Right, and what we're trying to do is how do you
Okay.
create multi-dwelling
So-
in Lyme?
Right, so we can go over those 2 issues. I would also, in reading your letter, I a lot of things I guess I take issue with.
Well,
Um,
that's why we're.
And I can go over them with you or not.
So this is the note that's dated
The-
September 28th?
Yeah, the 28th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
Okay, you sure?
Yes, actually.
Okay.
Other folks may have thoughts too.
And then, you know, after that, then perhaps we can go over, you know, how people feel about the, the getting rid of the 5-year thing and, or,
Actually, we had three points at the end of.
Okay, so
this.
I'll just-
So, tell us about your thoughts.
unless,
So you're talking about workable density bonus, PUDs, someplace
right.
else, and increase the principal number of.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, those are
Number of
alternatives.
alternatives.
Things we thought of.
Okay.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'd just like to go through some of the things that kind of jumped out at me in terms of what your interpretations of what you call the board's thoughts and just some things you said. So with the issue of targeting, your phrasing of targeting seniors, and I'm speaking for myself, you know, a lot of times in the letter, you talk about the board feels or the board says, and I don't think the board has an official position. These were informal discussions, and some individuals spoke up and others didn't. So I don't think it's accurate that the board said this. Some people said one thing, some
So it
people
would be
said.
better to say in our
There-
discussions
This
about
was
some,
raised
this was
as an
avoided.
issue.
I think that's,
Okay.
I think it's a lot more accurate.
Mhm.
Now, you talk about this, and it's kind of fundamental to your proposal that your 1/3 of the units being 1 bedrooms target seniors. I don't agree with that. I think you might get seniors, but you could get quite a range of people. My feeling about senior housing is, and I've said this before, is if, and this is just me, if we were gonna do anything about senior housing, I'd like to be 62 years and older and exclusively senior housing. So that's, you know, when you say target senior housing, an acknowledged need in the town, I understand that that's your opinion, but I don't share that. And I don't share the idea that because it's gonna be a 1 bedroom, that you wouldn't necessarily get children. Because everywhere I lived, 1 bedrooms were at a premium for young families to live more cheaply. And again, with a lot of these things, and I know if you use the phrase perhaps 1 mile from the town, everything in here, I really want to know what the impacts of these specific things are on what you could do with your project. Because when you say perhaps 1 mile, well, that's exactly where all of your property lies. And you have a lot of property, not just the Lockline Lodge, you have the piece across the street, you have your house, and you have the 16 acres to the north. So that's a tremendous amount of impact just on your property. So when you're suggesting these things, I'd really like to get a sense of what does this allow you to do that you can't do now?
Right. So you asked, in the previous
Right.
meeting, you said, so what would the build-up be? And
Right.
I started that conversation with David to find out how I might be able to
Right.
do that, and I can see a way
Okay,
to begin
great.
to think about that.
That would be really helpful,
Mhm.
and however you would present it, what can you do on your property now in your opinion anyway, under Lyme zoning? What would you be able to do without a 5-year wait and using the connections?
okay, so we were curious about that, and that's helpful. I thought what you meant by build out was what could we build on our property?
Yeah,
Yeah,
That is what I
okay.
mean.
Yeah.
All right.
I think you mean
But
both.
also-
I mean
Both
both,
build
I mean
out-
both.
build what you can build on your property and what the cumulative effect on all the other properties will
Properties
be
would
also.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
yeah. And so, and just to clarify, you were originally talking about all of the state highways, and that's now evolved into just the mile, is it a mile north and south, or?
That, well, that's a
Well,
question.
So that, I mean, again,
We mean Route
David
10.
was, yeah, we mean Route 10. David was very helpful to say, North Thetford Road is a state road. Is
Yeah.
it?
I was
And so
surprised.
it's
I
like,
thought it was
oh,
just a
So
state
is the
maintained
East
road,
Thetford
not a
Road,
state
so is
road.
the
I don't,
so is
we
the
don't mean
Dorchester
those.
Road.
So we
It says High
mean,
Street, isn't it?
Those are
Yep.
state highways?
Those are,
Yeah.
the state,
Or
any,
state maintained?
well, the state, when they consider any of the roads they maintain to be state highways. There are different classifications, but they are state highways.
Ah,
So you have East Thetford Road, North Thetford Road, High Street, On the Common, Dorchester Road.
and the state maintains them all. so
John
they're all
Thompson Way.
state towns. Okay, cool, that's good.
Yeah,
All right,
those are
well,
all-
we mean state route 10. That's the only one I know that has state route and the number, okay, got it.
so that, I mean, that's a clarification that we certainly did not mean every small town at the state main, or a small road at the state maintains.
So where are you with that now?
Route 10.
All of Route 10?
No,
One
so
mile.
we said, actually,
What, 1 mile north and south, or?
of the, I mean, certainly a mile north and south of the common would be interesting to us. I mean, no kidding. I mean,
Yeah.
But to,
but the-
within walking distance, we're looking look at the last paragraph of the letter. Any of these density enhancing forms of development could be restricted to a reasonable distance, perhaps 1 mile, from the boundary of the Lyme Common District on State Route 10. And you might also suggest lots of a minimum size. That could be.
So that-
Okay,
Yeah, so I mean, that's more where our proposal is going, but I'd still like to have your thoughts on our summary.
okay.
of
There's just certain, I guess, wording in here that caught my attention. The board suggests that there is no problem with housing costs because their housing inventories show that 29% of the homes in town are valued at 264 or below. Just for the record, I don't think that was anything that the board said as a official point of view. Some people expressed
Okay, all right.
opinions, and what at least you have the tapes, so
Yeah,
you can
and in
look.
fact, I'll send the link, the YouTube link to David.
I really don't wanna look.
Yeah, okay.
Once
It's
a
hard,
meeting is
it's
an hour.
hard,
Yeah,
yes.
Um,
Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But my feeling, or my recollection was that what we were saying was that the town has a healthy distribution, existing
Mhm.
healthy distribution, and
Of-
of house prices, yeah, home prices.
And now you said we.
Well,
So,
then then
I mean, I don't wanna put words in your mouth.
well, then I made a mistake. I would say but I will say we, because more than one person said that at the time, but I don't think it's a board.
So
Okay.
not that it's no problem, but a better statement is that there's a healthy distribution.
Yeah, I mean, one is really a question of facts. I mean, there is a range of housing prices.
Mhm.
We found about 29%
Right.
are below the 260. That's not a matter of opinion.
Right, that's a fact. that
It's a fact.
we're
Whether
29%,
or not there's a
yes.
problem with housing costs
Is a
matter of
different
opinion.
issue.
So, and we
So
have not
to split
expressed
that
it.
out.
Yeah,
And the board has not taken a stance on whether.
no.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And further, when you say we do not understand why the board does not recognize that the high cost of housing in town affects who can live here, including seniors who wish to downsize, I don't know what that even means.
Well, so, I think that's the crux of the question. You say, I mean, it is a fact, 29% are below the 260,000. I mean, that appears to be the objective fact. Whether that's a question, whether that's a concern, whether that's a problem, I think is something that I think the remaining points here show that there is a problem. We talked to
All right,
people.
all right, we can go through this,
Yeah.
but I'll just remind you that with 36 units, when you were proposing to the, proposing that project to the zoning board, you submitted, and my recollection is that the average cost was gonna be $450,000.
Well,
Nothing
actually,
was-
That's what somebody on the board said.
Well, that would not be correct. Our plan was to have a distribution of homes at 199, 299, 399, 499.
But what would the average cost be? Because that's, I remember that very clearly, because I was listening for that. And somebody on the board said $450,000, and that they were skeptical that was a reasonable
And
price.
if you had equal numbers, at 199, 299, 399, 499, you'd have 25% below 260, which is less than the town's current rate.
Right,
But they'd all be available.
right.
And that's the point that
Well,
we're
all right,
And-
so let's go to that point, you know,
Mhm.
because I read about lack of availability and people can't find things. So and this was like in a couple of minutes. You said nobody can find anything who wants to downsize. Michael Whitman found something. Vicky Smith found something. Bill Weeks found something. And I know of other people who found things. And in terms of availability, I looked at Zillow on October 8th at 2 p.m. And there is at 203 Dartmouth College Highway, there's a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, asking 209. 150 Dorchester, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, asking 225. 6 Canaan Ledge, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, asking 279. These are asking prices.
Right.
301 Orford Road, 3-bedroom, 3-bath, asking 309. And then 668 River Road, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, asking 340. And then there's one at 399. So if you knock off, 5 or 10%, these are basically affordable housing. Now this is, and I've looked, I don't look constantly, I'll skip a day every once in a while. No, I mean, I'll look
Yeah.
every 6 months.
Mhm.
There's never been a time where I haven't found at least a couple of affordable housing, workforce housing level
Mhm.
places available in Lyme. So my feeling, it's not an either or. I think any ordinance, any situation can be improved. But the dire language you use, I really disagree with.
So.
One of the questions, specifically speaking to workforce housing, is the ability to create workforce housing.
Well, it's one aspect, but it's part of the bigger picture, which includes what's available. Do we have a healthy distribution of price range in the town? And in particular, do we have a sufficient number of workforce housing? Those are all issues, but you're taking that out and making it the issue. That's not how I see it. I see it as an issue, but I don't see it as the exclusive issue. In the whole picture, can we improve? Of course, we can always improve. But are things, okay in the context? And I said that they're okay. There's certain things I would definitely like to see improve, potentially, depending upon what the price the town would pay to do those things. And that's always been one of my issues with both what you're proposing on your site, and in order to get it through a zoning amendment, applying it to a large swath of town. And to this point, I feel like you're just offering variations of the same zoning amendment, which is driven by what you want to do on your site. And we've had this discussion over and over again. It's driven by what you want. It's not driven by what's good for the town. And if the 5-year conversion is eliminated, you'll do the build out. And I'll be shocked if it's not an alarming result.
What is the 5-year conversion is, from our language.
If you, yeah.
If we say just simply allow up to 6 units to be built
If,
where a primary structure would be,
as a new structure, yeah.
you would be shocked.
If the impact wasn't enormous throughout Lyme. and that the impact on town services, on the character of the town, taxes, I imagine would be enormous.
So,
So we were at a meeting with Vicky and some other people not long ago, the breakfast that, the Upper Valley Housing Coalition has every 6 months. And I think it's pretty clear that there's a serious housing problem in the Upper Valley. And Vicky, you can speak to this probably more than I can, because you have to deal with it every day, but, and I don't know if you've gone to training events, but I think, does the board think, and now I am saying the board, think that there is a housing problem in the Upper Valley?
I do. I think there's a national housing problem, and I think it's driven by national policy, not by municipal policy. And there are things we can do and we can try to do, but I don't consider it at all guaranteed that what we would get with your proposal would be necessarily affordable housing or enough affordable housing to justify the trade-offs. So I am open to changing the ordinance, but I'm not, because it's driven, you always make an equivalency that, well, there's this problem in New Hampshire, there's this problem in Lyme, about housing. It's undeniable, everybody knows that. But then it's fed through your project. You
Well, that's
want,
how it works.
No, it's not how it works, not from my point of view. You want some certain things on your specific project that to me are contradictory to what is good for the town and what would address the actual problems.
Okay, that's what's important. It's not to say that developers usually come in and say, I have no interest in what we're doing, this is just a good thing to do. But the developer says, I have an idea that I think is a good idea and good for me and good for the town. And you're saying, it may or may not be good for us, you don't think what we're proposing is good for the town.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
But it would be good for the town if it were all 62 and over.
Don't make the equivalencies.
No, that's-
That was on a totally different subject. I said, if in terms of senior housing, this isn't senior housing. There's nothing in here that is about senior housing.
Well, but
I said
that's
if
the
I did
conversation we're
something
looking for.
about senior housing, then that's what it would be, exclusively 62 and older.
You're sitting on a thought.
Well, yeah, it would, if it was all senior housing, it would certainly change the impact. There's no question. But that's not what you
to
guys
be,
want
to be specific, to be explicit, the change to the impact would be.
On property taxes for one thing.
Mhm.
Are you guys open to 100% senior or no? Manny?
Well, we might have to build it for somebody else. I
So-
don't particularly
so
want
you-
to live in all
so
senior,
you-
but we
yeah.
own this property, we're gonna do something with it.
Well, you can sell property.
Right,
Been done before.
yeah, I mean,
Right,
clearly,
just
So
so
we
you
could,
could-
but, you know, and then,
but to answer your question,
How do you develop it?
it's not attractive to us to be senior only. We like kids. I think it's an important thing to have.
And I mean, that was my understanding.
Children in the
it's
community.
always
right,
been
yeah.
our desire, is to
Right.
live in an intergenerational, not
Yeah.
just go off and live in.
There are some
Separate.
great opportunities for volunteering at the Lyme School that I just learned
I already
about.
volunteered in the Thetford School.
Okay, well, I'm just saying,
But
you
get me
know,
over here.
yeah,
I
yeah.
volunteered in the Thetford ski, in the Lyme ski program.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, cause I think that I like that outreach that the school's doing to involve community members in the school and, you know,
Absolutely.
enriches, you know, both ways,
Yeah,
but, yeah,
I mean, Kendall has daycare in it, but there's
Right.
very little communication between the daycare and
Right.
the 90-year-old. My mom lives in that Kendall and Overland,
Right.
so that's how I know it.
yeah.
So what, we will be back in 2 weeks with specific language, but what we wanted to hear tonight was, okay, we're willing is the wrong word. We understand that conversion is a way to back into it, but how do we get If lots are expensive in Lyme, new home construction is expensive in Lyme, purchasing home is expensive in Lyme, all these are all facts that are drawn from here. How do people of more moderate income live in Lyme? And the only way we can think of it is to have more people on the
So-
lot.
John just
Just-
listed houses that are for sale.
What did I,
Right.
did you hear anything I said?
I mean, that's, if houses are for sale and nobody's
The
buying
houses
them, that
for
means
sale
there's
and-
excess
That
supply.
house, I look at Zillow too with some frequency,
Yeah.
and that house, there's one or two, and that one's been, that particular one, if I know what you've been, it's been on the
It
market
wasn't one or two,
for-
there were 1, 2, 3,
Okay, my
4,
house I
5,
bought was on
6.
the market for a year, yeah.
Right.
You buy houses in that price level, and they're not elegant. There's nothing necessarily fancy about them, but guess what? It's workforce housing. That's what I could afford.
Okay.
That's what I bought. And that's, you know,
And
so I,
yours are in this mix.
so
In
I
the
could,
last
so I could
4
stay in line.
years-
That's what I did. Cause I had to downsize. I couldn't afford my big house. I couldn't afford the taxes, so I downsized. Yeah, it's not glamorous, but you know what? It's my house.
So when you,
But we're
when you
not-
say, you ask the question, how can people live in Lyme who don't have a lot of means, there's your answer.
No, in the last 4 years, 64 single-family homes were sold, and Vicky's one of those. Only 13% of those.
I have
Were
different
under
figures than you, so I'd
260.
I'd like to see your
Well,
figures.
The other thing is that my house was sold to a young family.
Your house you were in.
My older
Yeah,
house,
right.
my 4-bedroom
Uh-huh.
house was sold to a young family, which is, I think, the type of people you want to have move into town. I'm like shuddering because they moved in with 2, and they weren't even there a year before there's 3 kids. And all of a sudden, I'm shooting myself in the foot, because my taxes are gonna be paying for those kids, I mean, for a long time. The rest of my lifetime, I'm gonna be paying for those kids, which is, you know, that's what happens, but, you know, so, and they are not trust fund kids. They are working family, and
Right.
they were able to find their way into my house that I sold,
Well, I mean,
so.
it's an interesting conversation to say, what are the taxes like in Lyme? And certainly one can say, oh, I feel like my taxes are very high. The reality is taxes in Lyme are very low in comparison to almost every other town. And so people may feel like it's painful to pay, but as a percentage of income in town, this is the, as we know, the wealthiest town in New Hampshire until you hit the seacoast. And so.
No, there's no London, which is wealthier.
And
Well,
the,
what
you know,
is it?
the other thing, the other thing about,
Remember
excuse me,
this.
the other thing about the,
Right.
it may be, I don't know, you know, what the definitions are. It's, there definitely is a lot of wealth in Lyme, but it's an economically very diverse town. And there are a lot of people in town who are, don't have a lot of means and are very concerned about their taxes and are hanging on by their fingernails. So one thing I'm very sensitive about is the impact on taxes, because what you're talking about is how does a certain a financial profile, how do people of that financial profile live in Lyme? Well, there are people, a lot of people of that financial profile in Lyme, and I don't want to see them pushed out because of this.
And that's a terrific, that's why you're a member of the planning board, because.
No, I'm a member of the planning board because my wife wants me out of the house.
Well, okay. But that makes it sound as if we could provide a financial analysis that said, here's what the taxes would be on what we're proposing, this is how it would affect the schools, and you said, whoa, this will bring in more than that, then the board would, their eyes would light
You know,
up.
if you
It would
could,
certainly be valuable
yeah,
to
if
see
you
that
could
in credible
present
study.
a
Right.
case that was convincing,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And another thing I'll say, since I'm such a negative guy, is in terms of the connections, I'm open to considering the connections. My only concern about the connectivity is if it would essentially be something that could be gamed, that if there's some benefit of having the connection that allows more scale or density than would otherwise be allowed. Because, I mean, really, on most sites, there's so much lot coverage allowed that having a connection is really not much of a problem, is it?
It's that, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, my understanding is the ordinance allows, buildings up to a 7,000 square foot
Right,
footprint.
right.
And then you get a second story out of that, you get 14,000 total, and that's the max size of a
Right.
building. But if we had two of them together, or,
Oh, 7,000
Or-
square feet.
well, I mean, if we, or
Oh,
a 4,000 square foot footprint and another 4,000, and we wanted to join them, that, the last time I read the ordinance, the joining, the putting a roofed over passageway between them caused them to become a single building, and then it was
And that
greater
would
than
be gaming, but if you had two 2,500 square foot buildings, and you wanted to join those, so long as it didn't exceed the 7,000,
Right,
then that
that
wouldn't be
a
gaming,
problem.
okay, that's what,
Okay.
Right.
right.
So
We're not
I mean,
proposing the
I'm
Thetford
open to
Academy
that.
gym, I promise.
I'm open to that.
Okay.
I just don't wanna create essentially a loophole where
Yeah.
something that we wouldn't allow would then suddenly be allowed.
I think one of the things, if you think about, if you have two buildings and you put something in between them and say, well, this is just a connection between the building, and then all of a sudden you're putting dining room space in there. And you say, well, it's just a connection
Oh,
between the.
because it's more square feet
Right.
for living space.
Then it's
That's
right,
what
Then,
you're
then you're
gaming.
gaming
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
not using it as a access between buildings,
Yeah.
you're using it for,
additional purposes, right?
right,
Yeah,
other
right.
than, you know,
Yeah,
it's one thing, you know, if you put
okay.
some bookshelves in there
I
and
see.
store some books, that's one thing, but, you know, if you're
Right.
using it as space for people to be,
A bedroom. Yeah.
or a bedroom would be.
Okay, right,
you know,
okay.
you know, that's
We
where
can rent
the,
it out too.
Well, that actually probably
Sorry,
could.
that's,
that's
yeah.
where I think the issue comes,
Okay.
you know,
Ah,
and think of it, you know, this is New England, it is very typical to have a connector between your house and your barn, so you know, in the wintertime, you're going out to feed the cattle, you're not going outside. That's a typical use, but it's not, you know, make it used for storage. It's not heated, it's not,
Well, we've got, yeah, and our architect has worked hard on trying to do that, but but it is joined is what he's working on.
So that's one thing,
Okay.
when
Mhm.
you're thinking of language, one thing to think about is, well, what is the definition? What would the definition be? That we might be able to agree on, where you can get what you want, but we're not gonna feel like, well, this is a problem.
Okay. Are we right, and I think we are, I think we've checked, the town hasn't been able to use the affordable housing section, I don't know that.
It's not a question of the town,
No requests have been made or
not that I
granted.
know of, but it
Okay,
is
that's
feasible, and, you know, you could do it. I know it's not something you wanna do, but you could do it on your property. You could do it tomorrow.
I think you could, that's a good thing. I think, though, that you could only get 5 units of affordable housing on 100 acres, and therefore it's not feasible, because the 100 acres cost so much.
Well, you know,
Isn't that what we have
I
looked at?
don't know what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
I think it's because you're looking at how many lots you could create, and that would give you how many dwellings, is that how you're?
Yeah, that's.
No, it's, you know, you bought a piece of property that is largely undevelopable, I mean, that's,
I don't think that's true, I think that
well,
there's.
you're in steep
something like-
slopes, you know, it's very true.
Well,
It's
but
a
there-
fact that,
It is a fact,
You know,
that it's, they're part of a property is steep slopes, but there are something like 40 buildable acres there. So on the,
well, it's not
2
just
acre,
steep
I mean-
slopes, but there are also a lot of other
Sure.
conservation districts, you have a very complicated lot.
But I think we all agree, maybe we should say this, that if there were no lodging there, we had said without lot size averaging, we thought there were 5 lots there, on the 110 acres, as I recall.
Well, who said that?
This is a long time, you were on the board. though.
Yeah, there was never a final subdivision.
Well, we know, but there were 5.
That was a
there were
different board, and I disagree.
For purposes of
I-
lot size averaging.
Yeah, I don't know, I
I'm
don't
not
recall
going
that
back
it
to
was
anything that
five.
we didn't approve, and
Yeah.
we didn't approve anything, so.
Nothing was
All right,
approved.
let's say there were 4 lots on
Yeah.
110 acres. All you can get on a lot for the affordable, there's not many units you can get on it, and I think what we were told is we could only do one affordable development, we couldn't go in and do 30
Well,
units of affordable housing.
have you read the article?
Yeah,
Well, yes, and so
and not just us, but our council. And,
so the article says that on a 2-acre parcel, you can get 4 units. And so the question is, how many parcels could we make out of that?
Well, if you wanna go through the process, we can go through the process.
oh, we've spent $150,000 on engineering for this town already, we really
Oh,
might not
no,
spend any
But,
more.
this is
Try
to
to
your,
minimize.
this is to your point.
Yeah,
When you say things like, the town hasn't done anything about, using Article 11, nobody, the accurate thing is, nobody has used,
nobody has seen any way to make it work.
no, nobody has used it. There
And we
is.
don't know
there-
why.
No, that's not, can I finish? And I'll tell
Sorry.
you.
Sorry,
The way I would put it is different. Nobody has used it. In my opinion, it is absolutely something that can be utilized. People have chosen not to use it. You have chosen not to use it. But it is usable.
because it's not financially feasible.
For what you wanna do, it isn't.
Well, for its purpose.
For its
You
purpose.
couldn't
It's-
build affordable housing there, we've had
Of course you
people-
could, of course you could.
Not that it was, not unless we wanted to put $1 million of our own dollars into it, that we wouldn't get it back.
Well, first of all,
Would that be
could-
helpful for
you-
you to see what the affordable housing people, I
you
mean,
could-
they said you
have
cannot
have you-
build affordable housing on this
On
property
your
because
property.
it's not
Who said
affordable.
that?
Yeah, but that goes back to David's point about what is and what is not buildable on the
Right.
property. In a
Yeah.
different piece of property, you could probably get a lot more lots.
Well, and of
That's
course,
part of
Dave
the
Roby
issue.
was good enough to come in and say, there's no way to build. He mapped it all out, he said, all our property is representative of all the property, there, so.
That's what he said. What I
Yeah.
say is that, having looked at this and having done the math, in my opinion, that clause can be used in Lyme,
In line.
yes.
Well, not now, but I'd love to talk to you about that.
Okay.
Because there's some discussion about how to get
Okay.
affordable housing in line as a separate thing here, and that would be great.
Okay.
Okay, so I think, Tone, do we have, I mean, I feel like I've got enough to come back with something very specific.
Yeah.
But
Good, I do too.
you can do whatever else you need to do tonight. Let's see.
It never ends.
In the 7
Right.
minutes that you have left.
That's great. Oh, but I would like you guys to please come to the Thetford Planning Commission, because we spend at least a half an hour most weeks approving our minutes from the week, the meeting before. And at least just got, well, Dean Whitlock takes our notes, and they are excruciatingly detailed, they're wonderful.
What,
They're
you mean
usually
like
5 or 6
people,
pages long.
people
every
say, I don't agree with this, or?
Oh, we edit, do we use the Oxford comma here, or? So, you could just bring one of you guys over
I think
tomorrow,
I'll
it would be
skip it.
really good.
I think I'll skip it.
Bring them over here.
I like that, we're gonna have a field trip.